Okay, it looks like that number is starting to stabilize. So I am going to go ahead and get started for us. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our strategies for successfully working with language learners in the K-12 classroom today. So this is going to be a panel session. And before we dive in and I begin introduction for our moderator, I just wanted to provide some instructions for the CTLE credits, which I'm also going to drop into the chat. So if you are in need of either a certificate or CTLE credits, please email me. I'm going to put my email into the chat. And I will also be following up with an email to everyone after the webinar concludes. The information that we're going to need from you is your name, your birth date, and the last four of your social. Those are required by NYSED for the CTLE credits to be issued. And again, I'm going to drop that into the chat, those instructions, along with my email address. My name is Loriana Valentine. I'm the Director of Professional Development at the College of St. Rose. So we'll get that information out to you shortly. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our moderator. Our moderator today is Monty Brown III. He's an assistant principal of the English as a New Language and World Language departments at the Franklin Delano Roosevelt High School in Brooklyn, New York. Among his interests are the study of world languages as well as English language acquisition. He is bilingual in English and Spanish and serves as a student advocate and has been involved in community service projects in New York City and Michigan Hispanic communities for almost 30 years. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Education, a Master of Science in Education specializing in TESOL, and both school business and district leadership certifications from the College of St. Rose. He believes if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go as a team. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us, Monty. I'm going to turn it over to you so you can introduce our panelists and get the discussion going. And you are muted, so there you go.
Thank you very much for my introduction, and I'm excited to be here to be able to share something that I'm passionate about, and that is working with and advocating for our ELs. And this is a work in progress, right? In every school district, in every state and region, we are a work in progress and trying to do what's right by kids, what's best for kids. And so we have a distinguished group of teachers and administrators here, and let's get to know everyone. I'll start with the person next to me. We're going to talk about just our name, our current position, our education experience, scholarship, and our connection to our current position, what got us there. And I'll start with Dana Kowalczyk, certified TESOL teacher at Watervliet High School and Middle School. Dana.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, did you want me to say anything or?
Yeah, if you can say
Okay.
basically kind of like, your connection to your current position and what led you there, what got you there.
So I teach middle school English as a new language. I worked in public administration and nonprofits before becoming a teacher, and I just loved traveling and meeting new people and students, and love being around learning and around kids. So that's why I became a teacher instead.
And how long have you been teaching?
12 years.
Excellent. And then we have Asia. She's an associate professor and interim chair at the Department of Literacy Studies and Elementary Education at Sonoma State University in Rohnert Park, California. Asia, can you tell us a little bit about your educational journey and scholarship? What led you to the choices that you made in the field of ENL?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Asia LaDuke. As Monty said, I am at Sonoma State University in Rohnert Park, California, which is just about an hour north of San Francisco. My journey, so I'm originally from Connecticut. I am a Northeast gal. And my journey includes being an assistant professor in the Department of Teacher Education at St. Rose prior to joining the Sonoma State faculty in 2016. So I'm very excited to see colleagues and former students and various familiar faces in the panel today. In my work, we do a lot with language diversity to prepare primarily elementary students, though I do work with some of our practicing teachers in our graduate programs. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk with the panelists. Thank you.
Welcome, Asia. It's a pleasure to have you. Next, we'll have Sophia Paljevic, if I'm saying it correctly. Second grade teacher at PS 204 in the Bronx, another New York City educator, and she's an adjunct instructor at the College of St. Rose. Sophia, welcome. And can you tell us something about your scholarship and your connection to your current position, your journey, what's led you there?
Yeah, so I am in my 10th year of teaching, and I have been very lucky to find a wonderful school, and I've been at this school for 10 years, it's been my whole career so far. I did move around. I was a reading specialist kind of at the AIS provider for the first 2 years. And then I taught third grade for 6 years. And now I'm in second grade. And it's been a really great opportunity for me to kind of see how like I've been bridging my knowledge of third grade into teaching second grade and kind of seeing how that whole how all of that changes. And been working a lot of the students that we work with we have a good population of students from different countries, and it's just been wonderful to see how they've grown and how we've grown and how the school has we've physically grown. We're much larger from where we started, so yeah, and I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you, Sophia. And last but not least, Dr. Tammy Schillinger, ENL teacher for the SITE program, which and School District of Albany. Dr. Schillinger, can you tell us something about your journey and what your connection is to your current position through scholarship?
Hi, everyone. So I've been teaching for 21 years in the City School District of Albany. I've been teaching as an adjunct professor at St. Rose for over 12 years now. I was a regular ed teacher at the first many years of my career. And I started to really enjoy all the populations and all the students, but I really started to enjoy the English language learner population. So 7 years ago, I got my TESOL certificate and started working as an ENL teacher. But currently I'm in a really unique situation. So our director of ENL in Albany actually opened a Albany International Center that's placed in different schools. So what we do is, I used to be a push in, pull out ENL teacher, but now I'm the classroom third grade ENL teacher. So it's a combination of both certificates I'm using. And we only take refugees. So we're getting refugees from all over the world, whether it's from war-torn countries or just people who want to move here for a better life in their words, not mine. So we actually work with them for about 2 years before we send them back to their home school. We get them acclimated to the United States, get them set up with everything, and then they're able to go back to their home schools in about 2 years. So we only have English language learners in this school currently. I think I covered everything, right, Monty?
Yeah, that's amazing. And even though I work in the high school level, I feel that our schools have this in common. We often say that there's a runway from John F. Kennedy Airport to our school, because of the changing social political climate So welcome, Dr. Schillinger. Happy to have you with us. So I guess that loud school bell. So if there's no further ado, I think we can launch into our questions. And so I'm going to pose our first question for this event. It's, can you describe the typical profile? I think Dr. Schillinger kind of went into it a little bit. Can you describe the typical profile of an ENL student in your classroom or school? And what inspires you to work with the ENL population? Maybe we can go a little bit further into that if we choose to. Maybe we can just raise our hand, either in the screen or mechanically you can do that. And I'll call on you. Who would like to take that question?
Okay, I can. Anybody else
Okay.
want it? No. So a typical student in any, I think in my school district as well, thinking about that, are students who come to us. A majority of them are coming from, are refugees coming from escaping from their country. A lot of them come over, they escape from the country and they go to, like, sometimes refugee camps, which are not very safe or stable. And then they sometimes they're able to go to a country like Turkey and get settled before they come to us, because they have to get all their paperwork before they get over here. So there's a majority of our population. And then there's a small population who just, they choose to move here for whatever reason, just to be here. Maybe they have family here, things like that. So my students are from all over the country, different countries. I have students from Africa, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, and China, India. And so they all speak all languages. So for example, a lot of our schools in Albany School District have many different languages sitting in front of us. So right now in my own classroom, I have 11 different languages in my classroom learning English. And when they come to us, as most of you know, because you're TESOL people, most of them come to us with no language. So they're sitting in our classroom and they don't understand any English at that point. So that's kind of a typical student in the Albany School District. And of course, I already talked about what inspires me. I think one of my best stories was how humbled I was when I was a regular ed teacher and we started getting the students from Myanmar, Burma. I had 2 students and I was like, we never had this. It was just my regular population. First time we started having refugees come over and they didn't understand English. And I was a teacher, so I kind of knew what to do, but I wasn't certified, or I became more of an expert in TESOL. Like I've been trained by and learned from other teachers. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you paper and crayons and I'm gonna have you draw a picture. And I drew a flower and a tree. I said, okay, go ahead, draw a picture. And then I left and I came back. And I think what humbled me was they didn't draw a picture of a tree. They drew planes, knives, guns, and bodies dismembered with blood. So that was like, I like, that humbled me beyond, like, we know about the country. We see the news. I mean, we're all intelligent people, but just that moment of like, wait, what? So I think that in the moment I was like, wow, this is something that I want to learn more about and figure out what's going on and how do I help these students come to us and be in a safe environment and learn, academically, socially, all that stuff. So I think that's part of that first part where I first started being inspired by working with students of English language learners. So sorry about that picture of, but that just that was a humbling moment and I will never forget that. So.
Thank you, Dr. Schillinger. Anyone else?
I think, I'll just add on to that in respect of where I teach. A lot of the students who are coming as TESOL students are from the Dominican Republic. So therefore, in a way, when they do come here, they do, there's this sense of community because a lot of the students do speak Spanish here and they're dual language. So I don't necessarily have that experience because they have a shared experience, whether some were born there and they moved here. So it is an adjustment, but they do have the comfort of seeing, of being with people who do speak the like same language as them. So even if I don't necessarily speak Spanish, then like there are students who can help and they will translate. So then that kind of brings the like community together. So that's my experience. And what kind of the inspiration of all that is also just like, it's always a humbling thing to even like when they're learning English sometimes. And I have this thing about languages too, like when you're trying to say something in a different language and then somebody just, it's an awkward laugh that they do because you might have said it differently in that different language. And so then I'll always try to say things in their language, or whether it's Spanish or any of the other languages. So then like, even if they're kind of laughing at how I'm saying it, then like, oh, but if they say it in like, if they're trying to say the English words, then like our community just kind of grows because we're all trying, as opposed to them just trying to learn English. Then maybe there's other words that I'm also trying to learn. So then they see that together. So that was just kind of something from my perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Yeah, I come from a very similar background in terms of what Dr. Schillinger was mentioning. FDR, I don't know if you know anything about our school. We have some 59 different languages represented in our school. We have 3,000, between 3,200, 300 students. And of those students, about 1,250 of them are ELs. Our SIFE population is way over 200 students, and we get newcomers around throughout the entire year. And our top 10 languages are Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, Russian, Ukrainian, Uzbek, Arabic. And so, it's very, very common to see in one classroom upwards of 5, 6, sometimes even 10 different languages spoken, depending on how the programming goes. So our teachers are really, really flexible, and it's an inspiration for me to see the passion behind wanting to meet the students where they are in a holistic way. When you have students coming from different educational systems and they have different levels of proficiency in their home language, and they may even have some social emotional needs that need to be met also in the classroom. And so I feel like L teachers, this is what inspires me, because I tend to be a more I'm just more of a giver in that sense. I appreciate the philosophy of holistic teaching and providing equity and support in the classroom, so that every child's voice is noticed and heard in the classroom. And so because of that, I think that's what drew me to ENL education, and inspires me to see that in the classroom. I get super excited, and I want to support and collaborate with teachers who have that same energy around supporting ENL students, especially our students with interrupted formal education, because they're here, and it's really a big ask, like a heavy lift, that they're transitioning from one lifestyle to another. And so much has happened in between. And now they're in this opportunity that they can, learn and have a really formidable education. But, there's an incubation period that needs to happen. And, we are like the nurses in the NICU, kind of giving them that nurturing and care. So it's a very inspiring thing for me, what keeps me going in this profession. Is anyone else like to speak about their typical profile or anything that inspires them? If not, we can go on to the next question. So our next question is, what are some common misconceptions about L students, and how do you address them?
I can chime in here, I think, with
Okay.
and a response sort of to A and B, I suppose. So out here in the North Bay, I think our ENL profile is a little closer to Sophia's, where we have predominantly Spanish-speaking learners. And in our case, we have several schools and or programs within schools that are set up as dual immersion language academies. So we also place student teachers into those contexts and help them to obtain in our state what's called a bilingual authorization added onto their teaching certificate or credential. And that's growing. The need for bilingual educators is growing. Those programs are growing. So what I think, you know, for us as a teacher education program and trying to prepare teachers to best serve these communities, I think some of the misconceptions that go along with that. So we have, in our case, mostly students who are coming from Mexico or still have family in Mexico, are sometimes, you know, back and forth, not so much as say San Diego, where they're right on the border, but still, you know, students who may be missing school days and kind of coming back and forth. So it's very difficult, I think, with teacher candidates coming from their own experiences, if they haven't had that experience themselves, not looking at that from a deficit perspective, right? Like, oh, this student has been out this many days versus what assets and funds of knowledge is that student bringing back to school from having had this, you know, rich family experience, international experience. In some cases, we have students who are translators for their families and put into very mature contexts, you know, hospitals, et cetera, where they are advocating for their parents and their family members who are not as fluent in English. And so how do we figure out ways to tap into that and bring that into our instruction and our work with students? And think of it from an asset-based perspective versus a deficit. And they get there, but it does kind of initially, it's more, they missed this and what do I do? And also that feeling that they can't support a student if they don't also know the first language. And we've talked a lot about even just knowing some of the structure and different aspects of it or some vocabulary words. You can look at, say, a writing sample or listen to a conversation and pick out the places where they're applying their first language to learn the learning of English. So we do a lot of kind of rewiring of that mindset. And I apologize, Dana, I didn't see your virtual hand up, so I hope I didn't cut you off.
Thank you. Dana, would you
Yeah.
like to go? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, no, not at all. I tried to wait until you'd already started so I wouldn't interrupt. So in Waterville, we have a growing ENL population, and not all teachers have experience teaching in ENL classrooms. So sometimes a new co-teacher or a teacher who's now on the ENL team who hasn't taught ENL students before might have a common misconception that ENL students are my kids. And that other teachers and staff are sort of off the hook for building relationships or engaging the kids in learning, the ENL kids, that they might not need to differentiate the lessons, that I might do all of that work. And when I have 5 different co-taught classes and my own standalone class, you know, that's not possible. And, you know, the guidance office, if they haven't had ENL kids before, might think that there are things that we need to do in terms of getting translated materials for tests and other things that normally a guidance office might do. Or a big one is engaging families or even just contacting home. Teachers can be very nervous to talk to families who don't speak English when they haven't had to do that before. So one thing I like to do, instead of taking it all on, because there's so much to do apart from other people's things that other people in the building could be doing for their students, I try to provide resources as much as possible. So I might say something like, talking points is our district approved parent communication tool. I love it. I'll send it to you. It's great. When you get a message back, and if you still don't understand the translation, you can talk to a real person through the app. Try to really give people tools so that they can support the ENL students as well. One thing I also do is refer to the ENL students even just as our students or even your student, because a lot of people will say your student, referring to as if the student's my responsibility. And it's sort of a hard common misconception to break.
All teachers are teachers of ELs, right?
Mhm.
Dr. Schillinger?
I'll just add on to it. So a couple misconceptions that I've realized over the time I've been working. One is they just think that students who come from other countries don't know anything. That's one of the biggest ones. So if you're not used to this population, you just assume that they don't know something because they don't speak English. When actually they're language one, if they have it in language one, we know it transfers easily over to language two, which is our English. And sometimes students come with 3 or 4 languages. I have students who are speaking 3 to 4 languages. Now they're learning English. And you can easily see that they have the knowledge in their own language once it transfers over. And sometimes I can tell they have it in their own language just by talking to them and pictures, visuals, all that stuff. That's one of the things that I noticed, that they just assume they don't know something because they don't know English. The other thing with the parents is interesting. So a lot of people like that don't work with this population just also make the assumption or misconception that the parents are coming over here and they are in poverty. When actually my students' parents were translators for our military. They were teachers, doctors, business owners. I mean, I could name all the things, like, so they just assume like they're gonna come over here and like just, they're with poverty, we have to take care of them. And that's one of the things we've been talking about on my diversity team, is that when you do that, you're making the assumption that they can't take care of themselves, and they can. They just needed help getting over here, away from the non-safe environment, and then they can set stuff up. So that's one of the biggest or two that I see, along with what Dana and Asia said as well, because it's just interesting. They just assume that they coming with nothing, and actually, they were working for us, they were working for themselves, and they actually come over and they start to get certificates and being it that they come here because they have to redo everything. So I have families going to school for the doctor, the teacher. We had a psychologist go back to school. So they're trying to over here, trying to do the same thing they did over there. We have people, a gentleman who came over with his family. He owned a couple business over there. Within a few years, he saved money and he worked like 3-4 jobs, and he opened his own business here. So we're seeing a lot of that. And then the other thing that was a really funny story is when we first, at my other school, I would be called down to help out any family that didn't speak English, because my secretary, she was great, but she just didn't know what to do. And I remember walking down the first time and she's going, "What are you saying? How can I help you?" And I'm like, no. I go, "They can hear you. They're not deaf. They just don't understand English." So we kind of like, I told her, talked to her about it. It was funny in the long end, but I talked to the parent and she was fine. But it was just interesting how she was like raising her voice like she was deaf, but actually she could hear. I just didn't understand the language. So helping people like understand the population, I think, is one of the most important things when it comes to misconceptions.
Yeah, I would add on to that. One of our L's passed the NYSA slot last June of 2022, and he was accepted into Yale this year. Super, super excited about him. He's a senior, very brilliant kid. And so we've been celebrating that all year. And I would say I would also agree that, the L profile is varied. It goes across different lifestyles, different social economic classes. So it's really contingent upon the teacher getting to know the child, know the student, know the family, and then being able to be in a better position to know how to support. We do have Ls that are non-traditional students where they have to work, and they have grueling work schedules. And sometimes, students will put their head down in class because they honestly got a few hours of sleep last night. And sometimes that can be a misconception in the classroom, which a student shows up and you think, oh, they're not motivated, or oh, they're not paying attention. But there could be extenuating circumstances of having to provide to be caregivers for other family members, younger siblings. And so these are responsibilities that students may not necessarily open up about or be open about. And so, you know, it takes time to get to know and build trust, but those are things that often come up and may impact scholarship in the classroom. Would anyone else like to speak on that? If not, we can go. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I just actually wanted to, it kind of ties into the third question that I think we have in terms of their culture. I think there's a misconception that also that the students know where they, from speaking from a K through 2 perspective or a K through 5 perspective, there's a misconception that the kids know where their family is from and what their culture is. And we have a lot, like there's an age old, where's your family from? They're from Africa. And it's like, right, but where in Africa? And they don't know where. And so having that conversation to then tie it and connect it, and I think I'm dipping into the next question, but to, you know, to have that conversation with the parents on how it's important for them to know where they are from. Because like, while some, you know, it might have been a struggle to get there, and also talking about what their parents maybe had went through in order for them to get here, and what they did so that their kids are living in this like life where it's you know, a little bit more comfortable actually than what like maybe how their parents had experienced when they first came here. And so kind of that whole conversation about their culture and kind of knowing where they came from is an important conversation to then again tie the family with the school together as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just go ahead and read the question since we've started into it. How do you incorporate cultural diversity and multilingualism in your curriculum and instruction, particularly as a monolingual English teacher, to support bilingualism and biliteracy in the classroom? So, you know, I don't know if some of us are multilingual, but you know, it's not, as we've established, it's not a prerequisite to be an ENL teacher. So how have some of us been able to achieve this, being monolingual?
I can jump in with this one too.
Okay.
I think I should disclose that I'm the language and literacy methods, one of the language and literacy methods folks here in our program. So one thing that we're very passionate about with our teacher candidates is the presence of not just multicultural or you know, representative texts, but also making sure there are multilingual texts in the classroom. And I recognize that when, as Sophia mentioned, when there is a kind of common shared language, that can be a little easier to find, say, for example, texts in Spanish or English and Spanish. Though I think that there can be, you know, using families as a resource so that if you do have languages that are not as, you know, as far as numbers, not as represented, can a student and a parent create a book together that comes into the classroom, and then that student can share it with their classmates and teach them some terms. And I think the positioning of students as experts. So like, as Sophia said, you know, you try it out and you're the expert in English and you're the teacher, but you're also not an expert in that language. And so you're a new learner. And then the student and their families are positioned as the experts, which we know in schools doesn't always get to happen. And so when you're creating a space for that sort of power dynamic, if you will, to change a bit, those students and their families are going to feel more welcome and more part of the school, right? Even just the presence of those texts can go such a long way. I've talked with students who said, I found like, you know, this book in my classroom library and it made me feel like I belonged there. And you may not even as a teacher know like the reach of that and the power of that, let alone like really, you know, making it a moment in your classroom or labeling things multilingually. Like there's so many very small things that can really make your students, and by extension their families, feel so welcome. I think too, one of the things that can also, as far as from the curriculum and instruction point of view, being clear in your planning about content objectives and language objectives. What are you asking students to do in terms of language to demonstrate that they've met that content objective, whether it's math, so social studies, science, language arts itself. And that also helps teachers or novice teachers think about, what am I asking students to do? How will I know that they've got it? What are they going to show me in terms of speaking, listening, reading, and writing? And it also makes their objectives clearer and more specific. And it doesn't take away whatsoever from the native speakers in the classroom, right? To be explicit about what you're asking for in terms of language, because all our learners, even if they're native English speakers, are all learning, academic language and the academic language of English. So there's nothing that's going to, delay those learners. If anything, it will strengthen their understanding of language also.
Thank you. Yeah, I also think about the FAIR model when introducing vocabulary and allowing students to write in their own language or draw, if that's, their connection to the word, and encouraging L1 and L2, simultaneously. With my own experience, I am bilingual. I speak English and Spanish, but, I've had classes where I've had students from Cote d'Ivoire. I've had students from different parts of the Middle East and Asia. And so with those students, my approach, though I relied on those things a lot more to support their L1. And, I think that it's very important as ENL teachers and administrators for us to also have a knowledge of what's happening in these countries. I'll give you a perfect example of this. One of our bilingual educators was experiencing some difficulty with her Asian students from the Fujian province of China. Typically, students that come to our school from that area do well in terms of literacy, and there's a lot of transferable skills in terms of literacy. However, this particular year, we noticed that there was a change in the L1, in the Chinese. And so even though this was a transitional bilingual education class, she was struggling to make these connections to the content in Chinese. And so we come to find out that these students had been students that had come from China to the United States, but had before been in Venezuela. So during the time period where it was a one-child, I guess, governmental decree, these families or these groups of families had moved to South America. And then when that no longer was a barrier, they moved back to China. And then from China, these families had migrated to the United States. And then, of course, we had them in our classroom. So, just kind of understanding that background, right? It gives teachers the bandwidth to be able to work with these students and give them what they need. I think it's, we are also doing our research and connected to getting to understand, the dynamics of different educational systems in different countries and also different political things that may impact our students as they appear before us in the classroom. Would anyone else like to take question C, or we can move on to D. D is, how do you ensure equitable access to resources and opportunities for ESL students in your school?
All right, I think I'll start off that one.
Okay.
I have a lot of ideas about this one. The first is, Title III funding for ENL students, being involved in budgeting and planning for what resources to purchase that are specifically for your ENL students is really helpful. Providing professional development yourself and meeting with co-teachers. So, professional development for your building or your district, and having regular meetings with co-teachers about teaching strategies and differentiation and, useful technology. Just make sure that everyone else in the building can use that lens also. Joining as many committees as you possibly can, like the diversity committee or the steering committee, pretty much any and all committees. Even if there's a safety committee, it's important to make sure that ENL students understand lockdown drills, and as well as everybody else in the building. Befriending staff in the building, making sure that you're close with the guidance office staff and social workers and the school psychologist. I know I have ENL students who have experienced a lot of trauma, and it's more than our social workers have dealt with before. So having close relationships with them, and being able to talk with each other about how to support your students better. Make sure to get resources toward them. Just knowing about all of the events and sports and after school activities so you can advocate for ENL students and make sure that they have access. For example, today there was a volleyball meeting for students that we didn't know about. And we have ENL students who want to play volleyball, and we had talked to the coach the year before to make sure that they would get the information, and they didn't. So we need to keep advocating to make sure that if it's just an announcement over the loudspeaker in English, if we miss it, then our kids miss out on it, and it's not fair. So just trying to be on top of everything and making connections with other people and making sure that they know how to get the word out to all students. Working with administrators to refine and create policies based on, in New York, it's the Commissioner's Regulations 154. I'm sure other states have similar, state policies for how to manage, like intake interviews of families and things like that. Translating is a big thing, translating, and advocating for translations, like messages home from the district, messages from specific teachers, parent communication, district documents like the student handbook, making sure that's accessible, and instructions to parents on how to access grades and other things that other resources that the general population can more easily access because it's in English, or just by word of mouth, sometimes parents learn about things. So taking those things and making a policy and writing it down and then having it translated. And connecting with families with resources that other families might not need or might already have access to, like adult English classes in the community, or medical resources, or mental health resources, refugee support centers, religious or community organizations in the area that are supportive. Just having sort of a in your back pocket some resources that you can send out to families that need them.
Thank you, Dana.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have anything to add? I have a unique privilege to be able to use my budget for ENL students. I'm very excited to be able to bring in programs that will support them with after-school tutoring, and just being creative and coming up with ideas based on the things that I've learned about them. Some of the initiatives that I put in place this year You know, one of the, you know, just how we look at standardized testing, and, you know, rather than a deficit, someone mentioned, you know, rather than a deficit model, looking at, you know, what are the achievements that they are making, even though albeit incrementally. And so, you know, looking at, okay, you know, we are getting closer and closer to passing these exams. What were the scores last year? What were the scores this year? So moving the school in a direction to have mock Regents exams so that students have an opportunity to be exposed to it at a low risk environment, and then having tutoring in place so that we actually dissect the exam, you know, in its parts. For example, that ELA exam, which has to be taken in English, right? You know, preparing them to be able to sit and take that exam without feeling like, you know, if you don't pass it, you're a failure. And, you know, being able to look at this test in its sections and give them test taking strategies, working with the vocabulary and the directions of the questions, helping them understand so that they can go through it chunk by chunk. I mean, if you can think about any type of anxiety that you've had around education, you know, some people are scared to death of math, or, you know, they're challenged by, you know, certain subjects. And then how have you been able to conquer that little by little, right? And the more you reduce the emotional anxiety, the more you're able to think clearly. So just kind of empowering them with those skill sets. So in my tutoring programs, I talk with my teachers about how can we break this exam into its parts, and then have tutoring sessions so that the students get to choose, you know what, I think I'm weak in this area, so I'm going to go to this particular session so that I could get support on just this particular area. So I've actually taken the ELA exam, and this section is for the central ideas, text analysis. This section is just for the argumentative essay. This section of tutoring is just for multiple choice taking and just general overall test taking strategies. And so for me, you know, that is something that I have developed based on my experience as a teacher, and just being able to implement that now that I have the budget for that and pay per teachers per session to do that. And another thing that we brought in is food prep and IBM certification training for students, so that they can have the possibility or the access to feel empowered, have a skill that could support them as they go to college, you know. And these are things that they could use to, you know, get work in the food industry, or I think last year we had yeah, we had food preparation training as well last year. We also have someone come in that does like a financial workshop, like how can you use your innate talents to make money. And so there's kind of like a talk group to talk about the things that they like to do and give them ideas about how they could use it to be able to make money, because, you know, we often know that that can be a barrier for a lot of things. And, you know, if they're able to make money and then, you know, enjoy doing it, then they're able to have the things that they need. So, you know, and as much as we emphasize SAT prep for college, and, you know, we emphasize standardized testing, tutoring for passing the Regents, we also try to give SEL and, you know, more practical support. So using the funds for those things, and then just celebrating them, celebrating their accomplishments, every opportunity that we get to create like a family-like atmosphere, using funds for that. And so it's been quite I'm honored to be able to be in a position to have an impact on this. And I appreciate, you know, the teachers that work with students and other administrators and other teachers to create that in their schools. Our next question is E, and it is, how do you effectively work with a content area co-teacher to balance academic content or preparation for standardized tests with language acquisition skills for ESL students? I don't know how many of us have co-teaching situations in our schools, but maybe someone would like to take that.
Yeah, I just
Go
want
ahead.
to add on to something you said, and then I can address that as well.
Okay,
I'm really glad you brought up the testing strategies that you use, because I think that's one thing that's not completely equitable. And how do we make it equitable for our Ls? For example, I teach third grade, so it's their first time they're taking a state test. So they just got here in America. And you know that they have 1 year exemption. So if they've been here less than a year, they don't have to take the LA test. But a year and 1 day, they have to take that test. So we know that language acquisition takes time. So first they understand what you're saying, then they speak, they're able to speak in English, and then the reading and writing come next, right? So within like from September, and sometimes they come later, from, they come in March of the last year. So I have them for about a year and like 2 months they've been here, but they're still reading on a kindergarten level. So then they have to take the third grade New York State ELA exam. So, for our students who are on that level, we teach all those strategies. And Monty, I'm definitely going to use some of the strategies you're talking about and bring it to my principal, because I love that idea of breaking everything apart and having different tutoring sessions. That's amazing. But what I do for my students who don't know how to read yet, I tell them, find a word that you know on the state. You know the word pencil, circle, that's probably the answer. You know the word dog. So I just have them trying to match a word with something that's the answer. And then when they're done the test, like, that was so easy, because I set it up for them that they're not having anxiety over, because they see all these words and they know like 10 sight words, right? So I try to have them match a word. And when they do that, they circle it and they feel really good about themselves. That's how I'm making it. It's not equitable, I don't think, but it's more like, how can I have them attack that test and feel positive about it so they're not discouraged. Then my other students, we do like, teach all year, things like, get them ready for it. And our district is really great about they designed our curriculum to match like life learning, like what's going on in life, how do you learn and everything, but also like how to like critically think, which would help them on the state test. But for those younger, those little ones, the students who don't know that yet, I think that's the way I kind of like, do that work. So we have co-teachers, it says content area. So that would be more middle school and high school. So I would more speak to more like at my level. So when I was the ENL teacher, I had a co-teacher who was regular ed teacher. Now I'm the regular ed ENL teacher, but I also have an EL teacher that pushes into my room. So we're co-teaching. So we're really good about making sure that we're preparing students. We're meeting, we share all our resources with each other, like what I'm teaching this week, what she's teaching this week. So the kids are kind of seeing like a consistency across the teachers. So she'll bring in ideas like things that I taught or that I based on. We reteach. We triple dose them, which means that if they're really low in learning, they have me 2 times a day and they have her 1 time. So, trying to get them, sometimes it's 4 times a day. Sometimes those lower groups get that work. I'm just looking at the question, make sure I'm answering it, not going off. I think, yeah, and our biggest thing, like Asia was saying, language acquisition is so important. We focus on language objectives. My principal right now in the district is all about oralcy and making sure that we're ensuring that students are talking all the time and going along with how to learn those content objectives. So, I mean, we work very well together. We're making sure, I think that's the biggest thing. Like when you have a co-teacher, you have to share resources, you have to talk, you have to meet on the students. Our students are fluid, which means I move groups all the time. So after we do a lot of assessments, we do check-ins with the students, see where they're at. So they might be working with her or me, depending on what level they're at, how they're doing. I think that's the most important thing, is just making sure you're meeting, talking about the students, how are they progressing, and sharing your ideas with each other, which, some people feel, I think sometimes they're a little nervous about that. So I think I answered it.
absolutely, you did. There are some challenges, but it is important to be able to move through those challenges, because both it is important for them to grasp the content, but they can't do it if they don't understand the language. And you want to have continuity in their literacy, because that will support them in the higher grades. Does anyone else like to speak to this?
Yeah, I think
Sophia?
it's very interesting when we talk about the state test, because I did teach third grade. In terms of teaching for that, I find it to be very fascinating, because my opinion is that the value of the state test in terms of the student is pretty much zero. Like whether they get a 1, 2, or 3, or a 4 on the state test does not really affect how they continue. It does affect the rating of the school. And so I think that that's where the pressure comes on to the students. But I think it's a really interesting conversation, especially with L students, because there is this big like pressure. But then frankly, like I have friends who work in Westchester schools about 30 minutes out from the city, and they don't have the same pressure for test prep as we do in like city schools, because it's not something that's like greatly affected. And I think that there is some value in learning how to take a test, because I always say that they should take the test just to practice, because whatever job that they're going to get, they're going to have to take some test, whether they want to be a teacher, or if they want to do a college program, or if they want to be a plumber, or if they want to work, they need to be able to like know how they can sit and take a test. Like I learned I can't take a computer test because I'll fall asleep. I've done it twice. I know that it needs to be a like pencil and like paper test. So I find it interesting to always have that conversation, because I think there's some of the reality needs to be rooted in the fact that it doesn't hold as much value as I think for the students. And I think that sometimes that's put on to them, but it really doesn't matter to like that. What they get on the state test does not matter for their future. But I think that sometimes those, like, it's the way that we like, maybe talk about it, generally speaking, that it's like something that we tend to, then they're like, oh my God, I need to take this test and I need to know all these, and I need to know how to read it, and I don't know how to read it. And it's like, just choose C. When in doubt, choose C. Just that's it. And do the best. And if you restate the like the question for your claim, that's a point, and great, that's fantastic. So I don't know, that's just my like 2 cents in terms of the standardized test and getting them prepared for that. There's a test taking skill conversation to be had, but then it's also like, it's just a state test. It's just a state test.
And I think you make some great points, and I agree with you completely about that. And so we're required by the state to do this. So, right, how are we gonna, like, I guess, get students feel comfortable taking the test and feel successful and not have the anxiety? Because later on, you're right, they're gonna have to take tests at some point for something along the lines. Like, how are they gonna do that? So I completely agree with that. The point you made, Sophia, it's like great. And we're required. So how are we gonna make it more, accessible, fun, like I said, match the word. Yeah, you got it right.
Yeah.
Or C, like, you say check C. So, and then for the copying, when they have to write those long, I'm like, just copy whatever words, whatever words you like in there, you just copy them for those students.
Write the whole paragraph down.
Yeah, so they just copy it, and like, okay, good, great job, So I think that's a good point. And like, how do we help them feel good about it, I guess, in a way, right?
Because I think that we as the teachers feel the pressure too. And then sometimes when it's exhausting. So we kind of get caught up in it. So at first we're like, oh, it's not a big deal, guys. We're just practicing and all that stuff. But then like week after week, it's happening. And so then we're like, wait a minute, hold on. So it's like us being kind of aware and like recognizing to take the pressure off of us a like little bit too, that like we're doing the best that we can, and they're also doing the best that like they can. And there's no like expectation. It's just as long as everyone's trying, then everyone's met the like goal basically.
Yeah, it is a great deal of pressure. Asia, please go ahead.
Yeah, if I can, thank you. I'm just thinking about, to add on to that, the down the road, right? So both Tammy and Sophia mentioned standardized tests don't go away, right? So depending on your career choices. And so we're in a position, and I think New York is similar. New York and California, I know both have rigorous standards for teachers, and I don't disagree with that necessarily. However, as Sophia mentioned, to what degree does this tell you that this is a qualified teacher? So we're in a very interesting position here in California, where, as I mentioned, we have this sort of statewide call for bilingual educators, and I think like most states, to diversify the teaching force, right? Racially, linguistically, et cetera. And yet we have lots of research about particularly our native speakers of other languages who are having difficulty with our content, particularly our content tests, and other of the barriers, basically the test they need to take to be a teacher. So we have the state is on one hand saying we need more diverse teachers, and then the other, they're passing or missing passing some of these tests by 2 points and having to take them over and over again, to the point where some walk away entirely. They say, you know what? And these are students that we see in front of kids being amazing, like literally changing lives. And yet the tests, we've done a lot of groups trying to kind of push back against this. And so it makes me happy to hear about some of that approach kind of happening early, to say, hey, this won't go away. This doesn't mean you're not a good student. This doesn't mean you're not a good teacher. But until we can sort of win that fight, you're going to have to learn how to navigate this. And I think without advocating for that, we are still going to have the same, teachers are still going to look the same and sound the same until we can figure out what those barriers are. And so I think as far as resources, I know we've been putting a lot of funding into how do we, number one, financially support our teacher candidates to take these tests over and over if they need to, because it is an ethical situation, right? Where these poor, students who are working and paying for their education, some are also parents or caregivers for their own parents, shelling out $100-200 per test and potentially, 3-4 times. So I know we've been trying to look at that and figure out ways that we can be supportive so that these amazing teachers can get out in front of students and begin their careers.
Wow, that's awesome. That is really good, really awesome. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question. So we're looking.
Gonna take a pause.
Okay.
Over here for any questions.
Do we have a pause?
Yeah, in the chat, it says, let's take a pause and
Okay.
ask questions.
Yeah, let's do that. So are there any questions? Maybe we can have it in the chat. From any of our distinguished guests, listeners.
Yeah, I think Dana, they got a specific question for you. In the Q&A box, it says, what's the translation app that you mentioned to communicate with parents?
So it's called Talking Points.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's free, and with EdLaw 2D in some states, I believe it's compliant. We're allowed to use it, and it's great because you can translate in I don't remember how many languages, but it's a lot of them. And there's an app that goes with it. You can download the app or not download the app. So depending on the parents or guardian's phone capabilities, it can be used either way. And if you download the app or use the website, if a translation doesn't make sense, then you can sort of just click a button and an actual person will look at the language and translate it for you. And there are also options for texts to be read out loud. So if the parent is not literate in their home language, then they can listen to it as well.
I'm curious, does that app, like, could you take a picture of a document and it could like help to translate it, or does it not? It's not capable of doing that.
No, it doesn't do
I'm
that,
thinking about that,
unfortunately.
'cause
I
our
think
home documents like are translated in English and like Spanish, but we also have other students who don't, like, whose parents don't speak Spanish either. So it'd be interesting to see if there's anything out there that has like where you could take the picture of the document and it can like
Google does that. Google Translation does that for certain
take a picture
languages.
of it.
And
Yeah.
then Dana, I use Talking Points too. It's amazing because it goes in. type it in English, it goes to their language, they type in their language, it comes back to me in English, it translates it for you. So I love that, that one. And yeah, so see, if there's certain languages that will do you actually, someone showed it to me, I was like amazed, like, wow. So like translate it for you. So we're lucky enough that Albany School District, we have translators on hand. We have a company that we hire. They translate everything for us. I don't know if any other district has that. It's really nice to have those, resources. So
Yeah, even if it was like student writing in their native language or in their first language, then we can like, there was a way to kind of see that and like be like, oh, okay, this is what they're, saying then, like, instead of me trying to type it. And you know how their handwriting can be too. So I'm like, is that a P or is that, and a like Q, where that, sure.
We use something that I'm going to roll out to some of my teachers. One of them is actually using it as a pilot. It's called Pocket Talk, and it's translations in the palm of your hand. It's like a little. It looks like those old iPods, but it will, as the teacher's talking, it just will translate the voice, and the student can read in their home language what's being said. And if you're monolingual, it really makes a difference. And being able to interact with students. And so we ordered like, I think over 300 this year. And so we're gonna be using that more and more in the classroom. All right, are there any more questions coming in from? I started using deepl.com, which is a Chrome extension for translation, and you can upload docx and PDF and get them translated. That's from Teresa Danson. So that might be an answer for doc translation. Okay. Any other questions from? I think Jenny is typing something right now. Oh, okay, she just typed the URL. Okay, so let's move on to F. What are some effective ways to provide differentiated instruction for L students at different proficiency levels with disabilities or special needs? Who would like to respond to that one? And I'll keep an eye on the box here in case something comes through.
I could go first.
Thank you.
No one else wants to. I'll go first anyway. So I think differentiation with any students is one of the most important things in teaching. That's my opinion, especially for English language learners. Research does say that we should expose students to the grade level text, grade level math, grade level reading, and that actually says, the research says that they will progress because of that exposure. So when you do have kids sitting in front of you and you're doing third grade, for my purpose, third grade work, but they're not understanding it. They're still hearing the language. They're starting to pick up things. But then during all our small group stuff, math and reading groups, we differentiate based on their level. So for me, I've been trained as a assessment teacher. So we're data driven. Students don't even know my students love assessments. They don't even know they're being assessed. It's just constantly assessing. They actually say, when am I going to get assessed, Ms. Schillender? I got folders for them and stuff. So we assess them. We decide what level they're on, reading level, foundational skills, phonics, all that stuff. And then we differentiate, we create the materials that they need to access that both in a group and on their own independently. And then what we talk about is we expose them to the grade level and we start to differentiate at their level. And eventually, guess what happens? It closes the gap for the L's. And I've seen it happen over the past 7 years I've been teaching. It's been amazing to see that growth and that come together where they're finally on grade level. It does take a couple years because they're learning English, but it is pretty amazing. So I think that it's really important to differentiate. I have students, so third grade, I have students that are still learning English. They just got here. So we're working on apple. And then I have kids working on sight words, and I have kids working on reading sentences, and I have kids reading third grade level text and fourth grade level text. So I have the whole range, and we want to make sure that we don't teach to the middle. Long time ago, I think we were taught that at some point, and then eventually these kids would catch up and these kids would be okay. That's not the case, right? So we make sure that we're differentiating through all that. It is a lot of work. And I luckily, you know, if you have a co-teacher, that work can be done with a co-teacher. And over the years, as you develop it and you get better at it and you save some resources, it does get easier. So, you know, I have like many different groups all day long that I'm differentiating for. So it is, you know, it is something that tends to be a lot of work, but I'm willing to do it because I think it's important when the kids feel successful at their level, but then they're also starting to see, oh, I'm starting to understand this third grade stuff you're talking about. So I think that's kind of like where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah, I would agree. Honestly, the differentiation piece is an excellent way. It's an excellent conduit to give actionable feedback to students, set goals for them, and to meet them where they're at. They really are visible in the classroom. And when you're doing those assessments and you're seeing where students are at, and then you tailor the instruction for the next day, it literally is allowing your data to drive the delivery of your instruction each day, which is like very, very good for all students, really.
Yeah, and I think the question
Anyone
effective
else?
ways, I think that's the one, for me, that's the most effective way to see where they're at and where I need to go with them. And I have them be part of that assessment. Like we look at the assessment together. I'm like, what do you think you need to work on? I make them part of what we're doing because then they have ownership over it. Like, oh, this week I think I'm gonna work on the OU sound because I didn't get those words this week, or I wasn't able to read those words. So I think that is also an effective way is they chart their own fluency, they chart their own data sometimes. I have them do that. I have them check off their sight words as they're reading. And I think when they have ownership, they get excited about seeing that grow. So that's another effective way that I think that I do that work.
I see something in the question and answer. Erkanda Feratovic, she's actually one of my teachers. She mentioned for teacher translations, Chat GPT. So I guess it works on a personal computer. I don't think we can do it here in the DOE, but if you're, I guess, translating text to different languages, it might be. I haven't used it for that purpose, but she's here saying it might be a good tool. Any other comments on F? Okay, so we can move to G. Can you discuss any policies or initiatives at the district or state level that impact E&L education? Going back to school, right? And school training.
I can start this one off. So in New York, we have documents that are important to read up on, like the blueprint for English language learners and bilingual Common Core progressions. Most other states, I think, use WIDA, Common Core standards, all those things, and like the Commissioner's Regulation 154, and I imagine most states have, policies that sort of outline how certain things have to work for E&L students. I've been thinking a lot lately about registering students. I've worked in places where administrators do intake interviews, and I've worked in districts where like the E&L team does intake interviews, just, as a difference of policy. And I've noticed that when the E&L team does them, I feel like we have a leg up on what needs the family has. We can ask specific academic questions to get a better idea of, what coursework high school newcomers might need. And we're able to establish a connection with the family, and like that, that established connection can really make an impact on family engagement for the student's entire school experience. So, one small policy like that can really affect a family and a student's experience with the school. Another initiative that school districts that I've worked at have been working on a lot in the last couple of years are, inclusivity and equity and inclusion, restorative justice, and cultural responsiveness. And those are big topics that everyone's trying to figure out, and definitely affect E&L students and their educational experience in general. And I try to read up on those topics and join all of those committees and, do work on my own, like, exploring and addressing any of my own implicit biases and being open to learning and growing so that I can be a better advocate for my ENL students. And right now I'm thinking a lot about an inclusivity initiative, and our school's answer was to host an international night. It wasn't my idea and I didn't choose it. That's what's happening. And I made sure to do a lot of research on how to host an international night in the right way, and try to be a part of that. So just learning about any initiative, if there are right ways or wrong ways, and how it would affect your ENL students, even if it's not an initiative that you've heard of before or worked with before.
I have a quick question based on policy. Do all of your institutions, schools, have a language allocation policy? That's something that we have to have in New York City public schools, where it's tied to ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, kind of replaced the No Child Left Behind Act. And we have to, one aspect of that is having plans in place. So every year, as a matter of fact, we're in the next 30 days, we'll be working on that. I think the submission date is in June. Do you all have that, or have you worked with that in your schools or institutions, anything like that? Anyone on their team?
I know I'm not in New York, but I think just as a comparative example, so in California, we have, as part of our ed code legislation, language around, each and every teacher, kind of to our points before, being responsible for comprehensive English language development. And so we break that down into integrated ELD, which is happening all day, every day in all subject areas in all classrooms. Some of those things, like I mentioned before, where we're looking at language objectives, providing language supports, multilingual texts, and then also designated ELD, which sounds like very similar to what Tammy's talking about, her role, where she's working with kids based on their proficiency levels as a result in our state of their LPAC tests, which is, I'm sure, comparable to the English proficiency test that you're using in New York. So, and of course, the way that's carried out varies. We have some schools that have very specific designated ELD teachers and times of the day and structures, and it's all very, working very well, and others where that is not so present. And so, but the state has what we call an English language arts, English language development framework. So it's actually another set of standards, as if our elementary folks need more standards to learn. They're learning science, the math ones, Common Core. But, it gets put in front of our teacher candidates right away. So they are primed to think about these English language development standards. And for our students who also instruct in Spanish, they're thinking about, what am I providing language support for my native English speakers who are adding Spanish? So at the very least, and I can't say, having not being from here, how long that's been the case, but at least in recent years, that is very front and center in the work we do with new teachers. And so, yeah, I think as far as the allocation, I can't speak to that, but I know there's legislation and legal language as far as teachers being responsible for English language development.
Yeah, we most people know it by we call it the LAP. And we have to outline it. There's a LAP committee. It should be a LAP team made up of parents, teachers, and we speak to, how do we address the different programs that we have in our school? How do we account for differentiation? How do we use technology? All of those things need to be laid out. There's a series of questions that we have to answer, and we submit this LAP on behalf of our school. It gets uploaded into a portal, and it gets reviewed, because they want to know at the end of the year, because we at the end of the year, it comes back to us, and then we have to speak to, did we meet these goals? So it's an accountability system to the Department of Education that schools have to work with each year. All right, we're going to wrap up. We can have one final call for any questions. Seems like there's a few more people than we started with. So CTLE information. You see. Well, yeah, thanks.
Hi, everyone. So I can go ahead and re-enter the CTLE information. So what you'll need to do is just send me an email. I'm going to drop that into the chat for either a certificate, if you require a certificate of completion, or the CTLE credits. For the CTLE credits, NYSED requires the your first and last name, date of birth, and last 4 of your social. So just so you're aware, that's the information that we will need from you in order to complete that form and issue those credits to you. So I've dropped my email into the chat. If you can send me an email, I will get that rolling and we should get that out to you hopefully within the next week or so. But please be aware we do get inundated. So appreciate your patience as we process everything.
Okay, and I believe, oh, someone asks again, what do you need? Rosario Torres.
I'll drop it into the chat.
Okay. Someone also made a point, an anonymous attendee, to Asia's point of licensure exams. Says licensure exams is also relevant for military dependents who are certified out of state. This person is happy to hear that states are updating their certification process to grant more access for qualified educators to teach. Also, school districts need to update their hiring processes and reflect updated state laws that allow military dependents with valid out-of-state licenses to gain employment. I don't know if you wanted to say something to that, Asia.
Yeah, I think it just reiterates the point that while there is a big need for teachers and, you know, lots of initiatives to diversify the teaching force, that there's the pathways and access to becoming a certified credentialed teacher should match, and it doesn't always. So I think sometimes those efforts, right, come from advocacy groups or universities or you know, we're still kind of fighting that fight to make sure the qualified teachers can get into those classrooms where they're so desperately needed.
Yeah. I believe, will they have access to the recording? Maria Cantasariti asked.
Yes, we will be sending out the recording within the next week.
Okay. So maybe we could just have one final round of all the panelists, if they could just speak to what kind of support or professional development opportunities are available for ENL educators and administrators, and if there are any final words of encouragement to pre-service teachers who are looking to get into the profession. You know, what would you tell them, I guess, would be, I guess, something, some practical encouraging words for them to consider.
I would say just for particularly the pre-service, you know, teacher candidates in the room, always kind of thinking about what am I asking students to do in terms of language. I think it just helps you to think through your lesson, your planning, your goals. You know, those things are often so embedded, like students will blah, 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 like we put our stand, and then we're not really unpacking what that's going to be requiring in terms of language, knowledge, skills, proficiency. And the more we can understand that and be explicit about it, and just have that be a habit of mind in your planning, the better you can support not only your native English speaking students, but your multilingual learners and those who are adding English as a new language. And it just becomes part of what you do. And it doesn't feel like an afterthought. It's just really embedded in your practice.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Maybe we could just take turns.
I can go next.
Okay.
Some professional development resources. I like Arburn and BOCES in New York. Their websites list a lot of professional development opportunities that you can sign up for, and they have newsletters and things like that. And also just hot tip, building a network of other ENL teachers. A lot of districts have a very small group of ENL teachers in the building as compared to other departments. So having a network of other ENL teachers that you can share resources with and outside of your building is really helpful. And in terms of being an ENL teacher, I think being an ENL teacher is the way to go. It's hard work, but if you like, I want to feel needed, and I want to feel like I can see the benefits of my work. And ENL kids have, they have the most needs a lot of times, and I always feel needed and loved by my students. And they just have the capacity and the potential to make insane gains. So it's really, it's definitely worth it.
I agree. I agree.
There's a quote that I love that I heard a long time ago. It says, choose a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And that's how I feel every day coming to work. So I don't feel like I'm working, even though we know, like Dana said, it's hard work. But I think if you choose something you love, you never feel like you're truly like working, So that's a great quote that I love.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely like to tag into the district office. When I was a teacher, I definitely would say advocate for your professional development, your professional learning. The district office, the Department of Multilingual Education in the district office definitely has access to a plethora of resources. So getting attached to, on the listservs, and also, I have found, even, like, believe it or not, on Facebook, there are ENL groups, there are world language groups, and teachers share information with one another. Administrators post job postings. I mean, it's just, it's become a place. LinkedIn is another place. I have my LinkedIn on the screen there. These are also ways. So just kind of being aware. I am the type of administrator, I love anything I see that's professional learning, I send it out. I tell my teachers, go for it. The least you could do is just go for it, and if we have to say not at this time, maybe another time, that's fine. But like, just always go for professional learning. And then I encourage them to turnkey to our other teachers so that they can be able to benefit from that. So yeah, those are things that I would say. And in terms of like just in practical inspiration for the profession, I find that I learn so much more than I'm able to teach when I lead with an open heart and an open mind, and working with students and seeing them as people, not their circumstances, but just as people. I learn so much about the world around me, and I come to appreciate so much more in this profession. I think that this is, and I have yet to meet an ENL teacher who doesn't resonate with, because of the fact that we get into this profession because we're looking for the similarities, we're looking for unison, we're looking for ways to bring people together as opposed to ways to divide. And I think that coming up with all of these strategies and approaches to work with students to empower them is just, I think, this a service of love, to be honest. And it's a very uplifting work. All right, so if there are no further comments, I guess we are at 4:59. I want to thank all the panelists for commenting and sharing. It was a pleasure meeting all of you. And I hope our paths cross again soon. And I want to thank all the participants for being here and wishing you the best of luck in your career endeavors.